Welcome back team, how's it going? Today we're going to be going through everything you need to know about three-wave crashing. Now this is one of the most common ways to play out your early lane and top lane, however I still see a lot of players struggle with it. Either they push too quickly by playing too aggressive, or maybe when you review your games you realize you've been doing that and you do the opposite, you push way too slowly and your opponent gets level 2 before you and you start losing trades. So I'm going to be going through exactly how to three-wave crash perfectly, regardless of the champion you're playing or the matchup that you're in, and the benefits and pretty much everything you need to know about this concept. So if that sounds good to you, then let's get started. Hey everyone, if you're passionate about improving and leveling up your gameplay, I've been offering coaching classes for 5 days a week for quite some time, and just seen firsthand how much my students have been improving across all different elo brackets. How it works is you'll come to a class with a VOD like reviewed, and I'm going to help you with your early game, your mid game, or anything you feel like needs improving. And if you're unsure, then I'm going to steer you in the right direction by setting clear learning objectives. Link's going to be in the description, I hope to see you there, but if not, then enjoy the video. Now we're going to be starting off this guide by going through how exactly to three-wave crash in detail, and then some examples of myself doing it. So pretty much to three-wave crash, to try to simplify it, you want to be slowly pushing wave 1 and 2, building it together with wave 3, and then once wave 3 arrives, you want to dump everything you have on the wave, and ideally hitting the enemy champion and the wave at the same time, and then cleanly crash the wave, because if every single minion of wave 3 hits the enemy tower, they're not going to switch targets no matter what, which means the wave bouncing back towards you is all going to be full HP, which is going to make your bounce back very clean. But if the wave crashes slightly outside the tower and it starts hitting the enemy wave, it can be really hard for you to get it under, or the wave can be low HP and you can lose some minions. So it's really important that you try to crash wave 3 as cleanly as you can, especially if you're a melee champion. If you're a ranged champ, it doesn't matter as much, because you can last hit the minions under tower anyway, but it's still a good habit to get into, cleanly crashing your hard push wave. Now, to execute this, you want to be making sure you hit the wave once it comes in one time, and then you need to assess what your opponent is doing. So the golden rule, I'd say the number one rule that I'd hope you'd take from this section, is that you only need to do slightly more damage than your opponent. This is really important because regardless of the matchup, you can play the exact same matchup twice in a row. However, if your opponent in game 1 is hitting the wave a lot, you need to be constantly auto-attacking it to ensure you're getting pushed and getting level 2 and level 3 before them. But if you verse the exact same player, let's say it's Aatrox, and this guy is just sitting 2 screens away, letting minions bleed out, barely touching it, now you need to barely touch the wave as well. So it's really important that you assess what your opponent is doing before you decide what to do on the wave. But a pattern to get into is at level 1, walk in, whack the wave to stack your grasp or just to secure push, and then see what your opponent is doing and make the decision, do I need to push more than I currently am? And if they're not doing anything, then you only need to last it and use your abilities on the enemy champion, and then once wave 3 is there, then you need to be getting it in. So really important that you assess what your opponent is doing. If they're that NPC playstyle, if you're versus a Mundo or a Nessus, sitting really far back and just chucking Qs and Es, you don't need to touch the wave at all pretty much, you just need to last it, and you need a hard push wave 3. Now, if you're playing a champion that has an ability that's most likely going to hit the wave and the enemy champion, so I'd say the big 3 culprits of this is Jaxi, Renekton Q, and Garani, but there are of course heaps. You need to see this as an investment. You don't even need to hit the wave straight away. I still would just one time, especially on Jax if you take Grasp, but keep in mind, even if you don't hit your opponent level 1, you are going to be hitting your opponent at some point. You're going to Jax E them and the whole wave, you can Renekton Q them, Garani, so on and so forth. So you need to see these abilities as an investment. You don't need to auto attack the wave at all as Garen if you're going to get push. Let's imagine you're playing for push. You don't need to auto attack the wave at all because your E is going to completely annihilate that wave. And same thing for Renekton or Jax. Your Q or your E, depending on the champion, is going to hit the wave so much, especially when you're trading with the enemy top laner, that you don't need to auto attack it hardly ever. Now you still should, to a degree, especially if you take grasp, auto attack it or just last hit the minions. But most of the time, if you're playing a champion with these strong AoE abilities, you need to see that ability as an investment. Oh, I don't even need to touch the wave at all, wave 1 and 2, because if my opponent walks up, I'm going to beat his head in with Jaxi and my E is going to stun the entire wave. Now you also want to be using these spells with intention. So when wave 3 comes in, you want to, for Jax, you want to Q onto your opponent's head, auto attack them, absorb all that minion aggro, then put your E up, and ideally your E hits the enemy champion and the wave at the same time, and that's going to make it very easy for you to crash wave 3. I would recommend on this point here that you wait for level 3 before you force on with your Renekton E, or your Jax Q or something like that, because there's only 2 minions of wave 3 that's going to get you level 3, so kill that second minion, then Jax Q onto their head instantly, pop your E up, or Renekton Q, doesn't matter, but you want to be hard pushing their wave 3. But you can see, because these abilities do so much damage to the wave, especially while you're trading at the same time, that is going to help you push. Now, let's imagine you're playing a champion that doesn't have this big tactical nuke on the wave. Playing aggressive is still going to get you pushed, because if you hit your opponent, let's just say a champion that doesn't have an AoE spell, let's say Kennen, right? Let's imagine you're not really hitting the wave with E. If you auto attack let's say Quinn. Quinn's a better example. You auto attack your opponent once, the minions turn on to you. Even if you walk into the bush straight away and drop that minion aggro, the fact that the minions stop beating up your wave and turn to have a scrap with you means they're doing less damage to your wave, which means in turn your wave is going to push faster. So especially if you're playing aggressive and hitting your opponent a lot on a ranged champion or even a melee. Let's say you walk up and whack somebody with, what's a good example? Fiora Q. All the minions are going to turn onto you. That's a good example. All the minions are going to hit you and scrap with you. So even if you drop that minion aggro by walking into the bush, then you're still going to be getting pushed even if you barely auto attack the wave. But keep in mind, it is depending on what your opponent's doing. If your opponent's hitting the wave, then even if you're hitting them as well, you probably need to be hitting the wave as well. You want to be doing slightly more damage than your opponent so that you get level 2 before them, so you can abuse that level 2 versus 1 timer. And that's going to guarantee you push, because if they don't respect that timer, you're going to shit on them, and then they can't walk up to the wave anymore. And then if they do respect that timer, that means they're not touching the wave, so you're going to be getting pushed because of that. Now, just to expand on this point a little bit, even though it's not technically a 3-wave crash, there are going to be times when you're initially playing for a 3-wave, but you need to adapt into a 2 or a 4-wave. So the best time to adapt into a 2-wave is, let's say you're playing Garen and initially you're playing for a 3-wave, but the enemy Mundo walks up to auto-attack Elastin, and you QE him, and your E completely dominates him. It gets him to 20% HP or burns his flash, but it shits on your wave at the same time. If that's the case, it's perfectly okay to adapt and push wave 2 in as fast as you can, as long as you're cleanly 2-wave crashing. If you push wave 2 in quickly, it's perfectly okay as long as all of the minions get under tower. You just don't want to do a 2.5 where it's awkwardly stuck outside the tower and the wave 3 caster minions are under the enemy tower. It's going to be really hard for you to do that. But a good rule to follow on this concept is, if you get a really good trade level 1 or 2, but it makes it so you have to 2-wave crash, that's perfectly fine as long as your 2-wave crash is okay. Now, the opposite of this, the 4-wave crash, let's say your opponent is playing really, really safe, and you're just slowly pushing the wave in, and you're just trying to stand behind the minions and deny him XP or CS, then in the, let's say wave 3, it arrives and you're playing a champ like Camille or Fiora where your wave clear is quite poor. If that's the case, if wave 3 arrives and your wave is still in the starting position, so still in the center of the lane, then you can adapt and do a 4-wave crash that is perfectly okay. Now, I wouldn't go into every game trying to do that, because that means if when wave 5 and wave 6 bounces back towards you, wave 6 is that cannon wave, which can be really, really tricky to go for an all-in or freeze and punish when they've got a cannon wave barreling towards you. So I'd still say a 3-wave is more optimal most of the time on a melee champion where you want to be killing your opponent. But if you're playing, especially if you're playing a ranged champion, a wave 4 crash is really OP, because you're just keeping the wave in the center, and you take over the third lane bush, and you poke them every single time they come up for a CS, where if you're poking them under tower, they can get a lot of the CS. They'll still get chunked, so it's still perfectly fine to poke them under tower, but if you keep the wave in the center for a long time, they will bleed out for a while. So on a ranged champion or a champion with bad wave clear, a 4-wave crash is a perfectly good option. Or if your opponent played so aggressive, you're both just heavy trading, both hitting the wave a lot, and then you can't really get wave 3 in cleanly, then you can adapt. Even if you're, let's say, playing Renekton versus Jack, sometimes you might need a 4-wave crash if your opponent is playing like a Psycho. So you can adapt, and the sign for it, the tell, is that when wave 3 arrives, wave 2 is still in the center of the lane. If that's the case, most of the time you can adapt into a nice 4-wave crash. Now I'm going to be going through a couple of examples of myself 3-wave crashing on different champions, and I want to start with Olaf versus Renekton. So I picked this one because it's an extremely volatile matchup. We both have Ignite, so very, very scrappy, and 3-wave crashing was able to gain me a big advantage in this game. So you see straight away, I Q him and the wave at the same time, so I'm pretty much guaranteed to get push. So it's really important that you develop a switch in your mind of when you're getting push or not. So it depends on what your opponent's doing, the matchup, things like that, but you really need to develop that switch, so when something happens in the lane, it switches in your mind and you know, okay, I'm getting pushed, time to chill out, time to put my feet up and just last hit and look for trades and barely touch the wave at all, last hit the minions as low as I can, and then when wave 3 arrives, then I can look to kill it. So you can see my switch was right after this trade. So we take this big trade, he dashes away, and I think I hit the minion one more time. Now I know I am getting pushed now. It doesn't matter how well he plays from now on. He started E, I've done so much damage to the wave, I hit him and tanked the wave. I'm getting prior. So now I slow down. I'm last seeing this minion really low HP. You can see it's barely 1 HP, and now I'm just clicking towards him, looking for trades, and last hitting very, very low HP thresholds on the minion wave. Wave 2 arrives. I have to be very careful here. Of course, I want to Q him and beat him up, but I know he'll dash away, and I don't want to ruin my wave. So here I Q him because I got 2 last hits at the same time. So even though I did a bit of minion damage, it's not too bad because I'm able to get this big trade for it. So again, trading is your top priority. If you can take a big trade and crash wave 2, it is fine, and that's not the case here. My trade is not big enough, in my opinion, that it's worth crashing wave 2, but I don't crash wave 2. I slow down my push a lot. You can see I'm really milking out how much damage the minions are taking before I last did it, and now the wave comes. So another thing to keep in mind, a big point for a 3-wave crash is you want to be killing the final minion of wave 2 as the 3rd wave arrives. Now this point is quite important because a lot of players I see, the wave 3 arrives and you still have 2 or 3 minions left on your wave 2, and if you're playing a champion like Camille or a champion like Fiora, you're probably not going to be able to cleanly crash wave 3 if that's the case. So really important to keep that in mind. You want to be killing that final minion of wave 2 as wave 3 arrives. And that's exactly what we did here. So now I'm just looking to trade and poke him down as much as I can. And I'm just going to hard push this wave. So I'll skip ahead. Initially, I thought about basing. I'm 80% HP. However, I'm 150 mana. Is it realistic I can kill him on the bounce back with such little mana when he's D-Shield 2nd Wind Champ? No way. So here instead, I go for a proxy. You just walk past him, go for that proxy using the advantage a clean 3-wave crash has given to me. If I crash wave 3 too slowly, I wouldn't have been able to do this. So I clear wave 4, I base, and as we can see, 25 out of 25 CS, not a bad score at all, but it's fine. Even if I miss 2 or 3 minions, I still got enough for longsword refillable, even if I didn't proxy that wave. So I'd say 17, including cannon, is pretty good because you can get longsword refill most of the time. But, you know, any more than that is going to be very, very good. So I come back to lane now. I've got my item, my resource advantage. Even though he's pretty healthy with D-Shield 2nd Wind being OP, he doesn't have a potion as well, and I've got this big item advantage, so I'm able to look for the kill. So you see very shortly, the big benefit of 3-wave crashing, the wave comes to you, and it gives you an opportunity. So one trade to burn is E, and then the second trade here, we're able to just beat him down. So the kill's not the main point. Of course, the point in this guide is the 3-wave crash. You can see I was trading with him. When I realized I've got push in my matchup, I started last hitting very slowly, and I made it so I killed the final minion of wave 2 as wave 3 arrived. So I was able to very easily crash wave 3 with plenty of time to spare. Now, for our second example, I have Camille versus Cassante, and I really wanted to do a Camille one, as she is one of the worst wave clears in top lane, so I thought it would be a good example, but I do want to preface this by saying, this is a VOD from last season, so my runes will be a bit different, and Cassante's are not as OP, but we're mainly caring about the wave control in this video. I mainly care about the 3-wave crash, which is why I don't mind using this old VOD. So we can see, level 1 ward really deep in the river, because I'm planning to play aggressive, and here, Cassante, he's late back to lane, because I took that trade. So let's imagine someone leashes or they're just late to lane for whatever reason. I'm completely chilling here. I'm not hitting the wave at all. The switch is already in my mind. I know I'm going to get push. He's late to lane. So I'm guaranteed to get pro. And now I'm going to take a big trade. He respects it, so I'm mainly playing for fun. It's pretty unrealistic. I can kill him level 1 to 3 in this matchup, especially modern day broken Cassante. So I'm just mainly looking to get good farm. But we can see slowly pushing wave 1 and 2, being really careful, because I know I want to hit him whenever he walks up, so any autos I do to the wave can be too much there. I hit him a couple of times, it pissed off the wave, so it's pretty much the same as me autoing it, and now wave 3 arrives, so I want to be getting in as fast as you can, and like we talked about, if you do have an AoE spell, you want to be using it on the wave and the enemy champion at the same time. Now, the casters, one of them did the stanky leg here, so I only got to hit 2 of them. I would have liked to hit more, but if your opponent is playing very safe, it can be quite tricky to hit them with your AoE spell at the same time. So sometimes you can take what you're given. So here you can see I'm spam queuing, auto queuing the wave. I initially thought about Eing him here. And the reason I didn't, he could just dodge it with E, of course. But I want to be getting this wave in as fast as I can. So I E back here, get that minion. And you can see I'm hard pushing this wave as much as I can. 18 out of 19 CS. Why do I have 18 out of 19? This matchup can be quite volatile. The reason for that, he is playing like a complete NPC, sitting far back because he was late to lane. So it's better for me to focus more so on good farm. So I crashed this wave here, and initially I was thinking about basing. I decided against it. Why? Because I'm high HP and high mana. My resources is not low, so you only need to base for resources and an item. So here we can see I'm using my advantage. Mid is a Kali Visione. It's a melee matchup. It's really volatile. So I want to be using any prio I can get to impact the mid matchup. So here, that's exactly what I do. I E in, and we're looking to beat her up. We couldn't get a kill, but you can see the idea behind it. I've got such a big timer created from my 3-wave crash that I'm looking to attack jungle or attack mid. You can see I actually passed through jungle and had a look at the blue, and I realized, okay, he cleared down. That's why I pinged the enemy jungle as well. So not only am I being impactful by trying to attack jungle and mid, I'm also pinging where the enemy jungler is, so tracking it for my whole team. So just from 3-wave crashing and using my prio well, using this free time I've created for myself well, I've impacted the entire map, I would say, mainly just mid, but the pings could help bottom in certain games, especially if you're bottom playing aggressive. So it's really good if you don't need a base that you pop your head into the enemy jungle. If you can't harass your opponent and you don't need a base, you can use your prio to really just run around and do whatever looks best in the moment. For our final example, we have Jax versus Poppy. Now, this is definitely a counter matchup. It's quite tricky for Jax. However, just because your matchup is bad doesn't mean you cannot get a 3-wave crash off, depending on the matchup, of course. Now, you can kind of visualize Poppy and Gragas being interchangeable with my explanation here, where they can beat you and neutralize you in the matchup, but 1 to 3 you can actually get push because Jax's E, if you absorb minion aggro, is so powerful. So you can see here, you'll see very shortly, I have very little interest in trading onto this Poppy. Am I going to kill a good Poppy player? 1 to 3. Very low chance. He's going to poke me down a lot with Q and Buckler, so I need to 3-wave crash so I can base. He's going to poke me down like crazy, so if I can't 3-wave crash, it's going to be very hard for me to recall without wasting my TP. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm mainly going to play for the wave control. So I'm just hitting the wave straight away, stacking grasp, and getting push. And here now, normally if you're playing for a trade, like versus Camille, you do not want to hit them at all when they have their shield up. And if you're versing a bad Poppy, you probably shouldn't even hit them when they have shield up, or if they have Q up, maybe you can wait for them to waste Q or shield. But versus a good Poppy player, he's going to pretty much be a range champion to me. He's going to Q and buckler me the whole time, so it's very hard for me to auto attack him. But here, this guy gave me an auto because he's got a shield on. He feels confident, and he probably has shield bash because it's really OP at the moment. So here I hit him, even though I don't care about doing damage to him. So my E can absorb the minion aggro and get a big stack E on the wave, and now boom, the switch in my mind. I am going to get prio from this point, so I just need to last hit. Ignore that miss minion, but you can see I'm hitting the minions when they're very low HP for the most part, and playing purely for a 3-wave crash. You can throw shit at me if you want, because I'm going to base and walk back anyway, and get all that HP back. That doesn't mean I'm not going to trade whatsoever. If he does something dumb, I'll punish him. Or if I can abuse level 2v1, I will. As you'll see, level 2, I click towards him straight away. So you can see if he walked up and melee attacked that minion for whatever reason, I would have queued onto his head. But he didn't, so I'm not going to. Very shortly, I queue onto him. So look where the wave is on the map. This is where your wave is, his wave is as well. So I know, okay, I'm not going to 2-wave crash Orkali now. I can jump onto his head. A little bit of a skill check, hoping he didn't W me. But he did. So he passed it, and now you can see I'm killing the last minion of wave 2 as the wave 3 is approaching. So a little bit too fast, I'd say, slightly. But a good metric to know if you push too quickly are the caster minions under tower. And here they're not, so it's perfectly fine what I did because they're not under tower. So it's really easy for me to hit them and push this wave. So you see very shortly, I jump onto his head and start fighting him because I want to absorb that minion aggro right now while his W is on cooldown for that brief, I think 3 or 4 seconds. And now I can get a big fat E on the wave. If he managed to escape the E somehow, it wouldn't be a big deal for me. But luckily, like we talked about, you want to hit the wave and the champion at the same time. And I get this big stacked E on the wave twice in this game, and now it's very easy for me to just hard push and base. So 14 out of 19, not our best performance. Keeping in mind it's a counter matchup, and you know, I'm a human as well, I'm going to miss some minions, but still fine because I can get an extra item from this point. So hopefully this guide shows you, this example shows you that even in a counter matchup, if your champion is a little bit stronger level 1, if you cleanly 3-wave crash, you get that item and resource advantage. It's going to put you in a really good position to play out that counter lane because you can hold on to your TP so that when they start shitting on you as a level 5 Gragas or Kennen or, you know, Poppy, something like that, you still have TP in your back pocket. Now, to expand even more on 3-wave crashing, I really wanted to go in detail on some vital information around cleanly 3-wave crashing. And one of them we already touched about in the first section, but it's really important, so I wanted to expand on it even more. You playing aggressive against your opponent will get you pushed. Every time you hit your opponent and draw minion damage towards you, even if you drop that minion aggro with the bush, that's drawing damage away from your wave. So if you're in a matchup where you have that advantage, or your opponent is playing like an NPC and sitting really far back, you don't need to feel pressured to to hit the wave very much at all, apart from last hitting, especially if that's the case and you have AoE abilities like a set E or something like that. You barely need to touch the wave. So if your opponent's playing safe, playing respectful, or you have the advantage in the matchup, so let's say you're playing Darius versus a Aatrox. It doesn't matter how good the Aatrox is, no matter what he does, as long as you're playing to a decent level, he's not going to get pushed in that matchup, so you don't need to feel very much pressure to hit the wave at all. In fact, you should just keep it in the center for as long as you can, and try to play as aggressive as possible every time he walks up. You even doing one trade where you hook him in, and auto WQ, even if all you did was last hit the minions on the bare minimum, last hitting the minions when they're 1 HP, what you doing one trade on Aatrox is going to guarantee that it's most likely going to be a 3-wave crash, and then when that 3rd wave comes in, you get level 3, if Aatrox is respecting, dump your Q on the wave, and you're going to get pushed where all you did was last hit, and maybe took 1 or 2 trades. It's going to be really common even if you're playing a range champion with bad wave clear spells, hitting your opponent will piss off the wave so much that you're going to be getting pushed because of that. Now, in terms of the available minions itself in the first 3 waves, it's going to add up to 19 CS. So I see a lot of people, when they're versing these NPC top laners, they still come away from the first 3 waves with around 11 CS, sometimes even 9, where if your opponent is playing very respectful and the matchup is favored for you, you should almost always have between 15 and 19. Now, no one's perfect. I'm not saying that you shouldn't miss CS, but 15 is a good minimum if you're in a really good matchup and your opponent is playing very safe. Now, if you're in a good matchup and your opponent is not playing safe and you're beating the shit out of them and burning flash or killing them, sure, you can have 13 or 12 CS, it's not a problem. Or if you're in a really volatile matchup like Yone versus Fiora, Jax, Camille, Ignite Riven, some crazy champions, a lot of trade action is going on, then you should always prioritize the trades over CS in top lane. If your matchup is volatile, or your opponent is giving you room to completely destroy them, then you should prioritize that trade over the minions. But if your opponent is playing safe, they're respecting your level 2, respecting your level 3, and they're just not walking up at all, or the matchup is good for you, and they're not giving you options, then you should play for perfect CS. Especially, maybe your opponent's not even playing safe, but they're playing a champion like Tarm or like Gragas, and you're playing a champ like Camille, you're not going to kill that guy level 1 to 3. It's not going to happen unless they do something completely terrible. So if that's the case as well, if your opponent is playing a neutralizer champion or a matchup that it's very unrealistic you can kill them, then you should play for perfect CS as well. And I do recommend practicing this. You can go into practice tool and load up and try to get 19 out of 19. That's really good practice on your champion. But most of the time, if you're getting pushed in your matchup, as a standard, you should be getting between 15 and 19 CS and not missing that cannon minion so that you can get a longsword, ruby, or amptome on your first recall, especially if you can get longsword and refillable around 17 CS. It's really, really good. But most of the time, if your opponent is playing safe or your matchup is good, I want you to have a high standard with between 15 and 19 CS from the first 3 waves. And the exception to that being if your lane is very volatile or your opponent gives you room to burn flash or kill or take really good trades, then it's okay to miss a couple more. Now, later on in this guide, I'm going to be going through the options you have available after 3-wave crashing, and one of them is going to be the cheater recall. And for those of you who don't know it, after you crash wave 3, you can base to get an item and a resource advantage and come back to lane, and your opponent has to clear that wave under tower, and then the wave is pushing out, so it's very hard for them to recall, so you can come back with that advantage. However, I still see a lot of players. Let's imagine you're playing Riven, and you crash wave 3, but you still have your longsword and your 3 pots and 90% HP, but you base anyway. There's no point cheater recalling, almost no point, just for an item advantage. It's better to stay in the lane and trim the wave and poke your opponent down so that you get level 4 at a similar timing and their HP bar is lower for that kill. That's going to be more valuable for you than the item. However, if you're half HP, half mana, you play that really volatile, so you get, let's say, half HP and half mana and a longsword back on a Jax, that's going to be extremely good for you. It's going to be super worth, of course, especially if you don't have TP. If you're an Ignite Fiora and you're half HP, half mana, a cheater recall is going to be extremely valuable. But if you're playing Renekton and pretty much no mana champion and you're full HP, then you don't need a base no matter what, unless the enemy jungler is just too scary to survive. If they have Camille and Rek'Sai and it's a split map scenario, maybe the enemy jungler is looking to gank you, and your jungler is playing Graves and farming bot Grump or something, then you can base service to avoid the jungler. But in terms of the matchup 1v1, only do a cheater recall for resource and item advantage, not just the item. And one more key piece of information on this topic is it's impossible to crash wave 3 before the enemy jungler ganks you if they do 3 camps. If the enemy jungler does raptors, red buff, and golems, you cannot crash wave 3 before they come top. They're going to gank you when you're halfway between crashing wave 3, and especially if you're trying to hard shot that wave and using abilities on it, it's going to be really easy for you to die. So the way to remedy this, if you're planning to play aggressive and crash wave 3, you should almost always ward level 1. Now there are exceptions. If you're versus a Kayle top and a Kayn jungle, you're not going to die to a gank, but I'd say even a Hecarim or a Lilia will gank you level 3 if it looks good for them, so I'd still recommend warding level 1 most of the time, and we'll go through the spots very shortly, but pretty much if you don't ward level 1, you just have to get lucky, especially if they're playing a champ like Camille or a champ like Lee Sin jungle where they have a lot of kill threat onto you, then you have to be very careful of that, so you should definitely ward level 1 against strong champions, but I'd still say it's good to ward, because even if you put your level 1 ward down, and they don't gank you, the wave is going to be coming back towards you anyway, so you don't really need that ward. And it's not going to spot the full clear gank. However, if they are full clearing, then that gank timer is going to be at around 3 minutes, just as your level 1 ward expires, around 3 to 3:10. So you know they're in the area anyway, with the wave coming back to you. So as long as you're mindful of it, and you think they could be there, then you don't actually need to see them anyway. So the level 1 ward allows you to crash wave 3 without dying to a gank. So it's going to be very valuable, even though it won't spot every single gank option they have available to them. So real quick on that point, I'll go through when and where to ward at level 1 to spot the enemy jungler, and if you're a big fan of my content, you've probably heard me talk about this before, but we can see here. Let's say you're playing blue side, and you're planning to beat up your opponent and crash wave 3, the enemy jungler can do any combination of these 3 camps, and kill you before you crash that wave. So on blue side, you always want to ward the tri-bush at around 1 minute 30, that's going to spot most jungle ganks. Now yes, it's not going to keep you invincible if they do 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3 and go around here, or if the wall something like that, they deserve to, maybe burn your flash or something like that. But most of the time, in my experience, in any elo bracket, this ward will spot the enemy jungler and keep you safe. Now, if you're on the opposite side, let's say you're playing on red side now, then you want to be warding deep in the river. So the reason it wants to be deep and not doing the lazy man's ward here is because you want to see the enemy jungler coming really far in advance, especially if they're playing a champion like Hecarim or Nunu or anything with a run up. You want to be warding here so that you can spot them. So this ward's really OP because if you see them coming, you have so much time to run away and escape. Now, yeah, there will be some exceptions. If you verse like a Zac or a Shaco, something like that, they can hop over this wall here. But as long as you're leaning on the top side of top lane up here, you should be fine most of the time. And if that's the case, then you can move your ward to here, and you'll see over the wall and see most of the river as well. But most of the time, you're not going to be versing those loser champions, so you can just ward here, and you're going to be safe. Now, we're going to be wrapping up this guide by going through the benefits or the options you can gain from a 3-wave crash. And one of the biggest, in my opinion, is just the fact that if you are 3-wave crashing, you're getting pushed in your matchup, which means you have the minion and XP advantage over your opponent, which makes it very easy for you to win trades and play for kills or make them very vulnerable on the bounce back. So it's really hard for them to fight you if you level up before them and you have this big stacking wave, especially when you crash wave 3, then you have so many options available open to you. Now, you have such a big timer that it's really hard to know, I'd say, in a given game what to do. It's really going to depend on your champion, but I'd say most of the time, after crashing wave 3, you are either basing and coming back to lane with resource and item advantage, or you're looking to poke them and trim the wave on that bounce back, so that when the wave is near your side of the tower, they're already low HP from your trading and trimming of the wave, that you can look to all in them and kill them level 4v4. Now, on top of cheater recalling, which we've already talked about, you can also gank mid. Let's say the enemy mid is playing Sylas or Yone and they're playing completely crazy, or they've got the enemy team Yasuo about to pop off. You can make an appearance and look to shut down the enemy mid, especially if you're playing a champion like a Gragas or a Camille. We have a really strong gank. You can also move to any skirmish, or if your jungler is fighting for top crab or invading enemy jungle, you can look to do that. Or if you're playing a champion like Riven or a champion like Olaf or Darius, you can invade the enemy jungle yourself. So a thing you can do, let's imagine you're playing Darius or Riven, you wave the ward, the enemy jungler level 1 has buff, and you see, oh, he didn't actually start blue. If he starts blue, you can go beat him up. If he doesn't start blue, you go back to lane, you crash your wave, and then you run into the enemy jungle and look to kill him level 3. And the enemy top laner is going to be stuck under tower catching the wave, so you give yourself a lot of options. Now, you can also harass under tower, depending on your champion. If you're playing a range champion, or if you're Zeus and you can perfectly juggle the tower aggro to not take a shot, then you can look to harass your opponent under tower as well. But most of the time, if you need to base, I would recommend basing. How do you know if you need to base? You need resources. So if you're half HP, half mana, especially if you're playing a champion with no TP, then you are going to need to base. If you're high HP, high mana, then you can stay. Or if you're, medium, let's say 75%, right? Hard mode on Camille, but you have TP. Camille doesn't really use a longsword that well compared to like a Fiora or a Riven or something like that. So you can look to stay and just poke and trim and maybe play for a Sheen buy instead. But most of the time, if you're heavy traded with your opponent and you've both taken a lot of damage or you've used a lot of mana, you should just base after crashing wave 3 if there's no option to attack mid or jungle. Now, the final benefit, and this is a very easy formula for getting solo kills in your lane, is the wave will bounce back towards you. As long as you don't bash the wave too much when it's coming to you, you want to trim the wave, and that is a skill you'll need to master. It's easier said than done, but you need to trim the wave so that it's not too big, so that they can crash it, and you try to trim it and try to get level 4, and if you're curious about how to trim properly, I do have a wave control guide, I'll link it in this video. They will help you a lot. There's a section just on trimming actually, so you can skip to that. But if you trim the wave well enough, the wave will be outside your tower, and if you're a level 4 Olaf or Riven or a strong champion, you're in a good matchup, you can run down your opponent and look for an easy solo kill. Alright everyone, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as usual, if you have any questions at all regarding 3-wave crashing or a video you'd like to see me make next, feel free to let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.